So we've put all of our data together, and now let's see how we can look at this holistically and see what we need to do over the next 1 year in order to meet these proposed requirements. And the quickest way to really do that is to use a feature of Excel called pivot tables. And you can do that by selecting this table. So I select all the cells in this table, go to insert and click pivot table. I want to paste this table in the same worksheet, so I click on existing worksheet and I'm going to place this just a few cells below my data. I say OK, and what you will see over here is a blank pivot table section. Let me zoom out a little bit. And let's see now what we need to do. So typically how this will work is that hiring is not done based on a project, but rather it is done based on location and roles. So I'm going to put locations and roles together and see where we are right now and where we need to be. So I start off by pulling my location in the rows and my roles right below them, so that I know that in which location how many people I need in which role. And then over here I'm going to pull my proposed requirement in my values and my current number of employees also in the values. Don't get confused, and maybe give me a minute to explain this pivot table to you. What I've essentially done is that I've created a summary of what are my requirements per location, per role, and what are my current number of employees in those locations in that role. Just to make it easier for us to read this data, I will redesign this table slightly, and you can do that by clicking anywhere on the table and go to the design section here on top. In my report layout, I'm going to say show in tabular form, so that the data is nicely next to each other. I will also turn off my subtotals over here. So I will say I do not want to see any subtotals. And what I want to do is I want to repeat all item labels. So what this tells me is over here that for China, I have 2 roles, developer and manager. My proposed requirement is 7 developers in China. Currently, I have 0. I require 1 manager in China. Currently, I have 0. In Germany, as you can see, I have a requirement for 6 consultants. And currently, I have 6 consultants. So there's no gap over here, and so on and so forth. So what we will do over here is essentially measure this gap. And I do that by taking the difference between my proposed requirement and my current requirement. And let me just format this as a number. And I can just paste this all the way down the table. And what you will see here is that over the next 1 year, I actually need to hire 108 people to be able to meet my future requirements. And so far, I think things are pretty simple. And now what we will do is we will try adding some buffer for expected fluctuations in our demand and supply. And this can be done by accounting for attrition. So we saw in our reference data that we have attrition data for each of our countries. And let's look up those values over here. So I do that again as before using the XLOOKUP function. And the thing that I want to look up is the location in this case. So I click on location, which is the first cell in this column, comma. I go to my reference data and I select this list of locations. Then use a comma sign and select the values corresponding to these locations that you want to look up over there. And in case a value is not found, we just use double quotes. This is an optional step in your formula. Close the bracket and you will have your attrition numbers. So I double click on it to pull my values all the way down till the end of the table. And you will see that I cannot see any attrition numbers for China. That is because this is a new region and I did not have these values in this table over here. So here I know that over the period of 1 year, 6% of people typically resign in Germany. So ideally what I should do is I should account for these people in my gap so that I'm not hiring just for 108 people, but I have this buffer built into my strategy. So let's try and account for attrition. And we do this again as before by multiplying this factor into our gap. So the way you would do that is you would take your gap and multiply that with 1 plus my attrition number, which tells me what this new value is. As you can see over here, Excel has returned an error, and that's because this value over here is blank. And a quick way of fixing that is by using the if error function. So if error, enclose your function within that, comma, and you don't want to see the error, instead you want to see a blank value, or maybe you want to see the same value, because actually if there is no attrition figures, just return the same value to me. So if there is an error in my formula, just give me the same value. So I get 7 over here. And let's again double click, drag this down, and as you can see that over here I have all of the new values that I need. And I'm sure you've spotted the next thing that we need to do, which is account for the decimals. So again, let's go back to our original formula, and this time I'm going to round up this by using the roundup function. So I use roundup, and like before, I do not need any fractions, so I'm going to select 0 in my number of digits, and here I see 7. And what you have over here is very clean numbers of what my future requirements are. Coincidentally, in our case, it's the same, and you've perhaps spotted it. That's because what we have in Mexico is actually negative growth. So because this project is ramping down slightly, we actually require fewer people now than we used to. So we actually have a negative figure over here, which is minus 11. So that number is also factoring into that. And in our next section, we'll actually see how these numbers can be used to plan properly for your strategy.